When Mieczysław Jonikas, or Mietek as he was often called, arrived in England in July 1940, the Battle of Britain had just begun. Germany had just defeated France and was now attempting to achieve air superiority in preparation for an invasion of England. The iconic Spitfire and Hurricane fighter aircraft were at the forefront of the effort to repel the invaders, supported by the Polish pilots of 303 Squadron. The Germans had initially focused their bombing on military installations, but were now redirecting their attacks onto London itself. Before the war, Mietek had accumulated considerable flying experience as a commercial pilot, working for LOT, Poland's national airline. After Germany's invasion of Poland in 1939, Mietek and his colleagues from LOT made their way through Romania to France, from where, in March 1940, they were sent to French air bases in Morocco. After the fall of France, Mietek and other Polish airmen sailed to England. There, on the last day of August, he was assigned to 305 Bomber Squadron. The unit had just been formed 2 days earlier, on the 29th of August 1940, at the RAF base in Bramcote. 305 Squadron was mainly made up of Polish airmen who had escaped to Britain after France's defeat. Its official title was 305 Squadron Ziemi Wielkopolski i Lidzki. By informal vote, the unit was named after Marszałek Józef Piłsudski. To emphasize the squadron's origins, it was divided into 2 flights. Flight A was named City of Lida, and Flight B City of Poznań. In September 1940, the unit received 8 Fairey battle aircraft, along with 1 Miles Magister. However, these were only used for training and did not participate in subsequent combat missions. Then, at the beginning of November 1940, 305 Squadron received its first Vickers Wellington Mark 1C version bombers, and it was on this type of aircraft that Mietek would carry out nearly all his combat missions. The Wellington was to be the workhorse of Bomber Command throughout the Second World War, even after the introduction of the 4-engine Avro Lancaster heavy bomber. When introduced, the twin-engine Wellington was capable of delivering higher performance than any previous design. The plane was usually operated by a crew of 6 and had a top speed of 270 miles an hour and a range of 2,200 miles. The Vickers Wellington was distinctive for its geodetic airframe construction, devised by Barnes Wallis, who became famous for inventing the dambuster bouncing bomb. The fuselage consisted of duralumin beams, which formed a metal framework. These were covered with dope-treated Irish linen, which constituted the outer skin of the aircraft. The lattice design gave the structure significant fail-safe strength, allowing some Wellingtons to return with areas of the framework missing. Mietek later recalled that after one mission they examined their aircraft and noticed that one piece of flak had gone right through the aircraft, narrowly missing their bombs. Fortunately, this close call had not stopped them from making it home safely. On the 2nd of December 1940, 305, together with 304 Squadron, moved to the RAF base at Syerston near Newark-on-Trent. On the 27th of January 1941, the 2 squadrons were inspected by King George VI and Queen Elizabeth. The weather conditions were very poor that winter, and so flying time was limited in the early months of 1941. Nevertheless, the pilots, navigators and radio operators underwent intensive training, and all the crews practiced parachute drill, dinghy drill, fire drill and drill for emergency landing. Given their pre-war flying experience on twin-engine aircraft, pilot officer Mieczysław Jonikas and flight sergeant Jan Trębaczowski were the first airmen in the squadron to be certified as pilot instructors. They were able to play a key role in bringing their colleagues up to speed. And finally, the training of the first crews was completed. On the 22nd of April 1941, the new commander of 305 Squadron, Squadron Leader Bohdan Kulczyński, reported to the commander of No. 1 Bomber Group that 4 crews had attained combat readiness. All bomber raids were now being carried out at night. Earlier in the war, the first raids had been carried out in daylight, but the casualty rate was so high that RAF Command turned to flying night missions. On the night of the 24th of April 1941, together with 2 planes from 304 Squadron, 3 planes from 305 Squadron flew the first combat sortie in the history of their squadron. The 3 Wellingtons from 305 Squadron took off early in the evening. Pilot officer Mieczysław Jonikas, who participated in this historic flight, piloted and commanded Wellington SMA. The target was to bomb fuel storage tanks at Vladingen, near Rotterdam. That night there was no moon. The weather was clear, with some ground haze over rivers in the target area. Coming in after Kulczyński's aircraft, Mietek's crew dropped 3 500-pound bombs and 2 canisters of incendiaries. Altogether, the aircraft spent 20 minutes over the target. Smoke and hazy conditions made observations of the results difficult, but 6 explosions were observed. All 3 crews returned to Seistan safely after this successful first mission. From then on, April 25th would be celebrated as 305 Squadron Day. The squadron's second bombing raid took place on the night of the 2nd of May 1941. This time, the objective was the industrial complex around the port of Emden, Germany's 3rd largest port. 7 aircraft took off on this mission. Unfortunately, Mietek's plane and 1 other plane had to turn back because of radio failure. During the raid on Emden, the squadron suffered its first loss. Wellington SMN was shot down by a German fighter and crashed in the Budel area in the Netherlands. Navigator Wacław Malak and gunner Mieczysław Ryszkiewicz were killed. The remaining crew members survived but were taken prisoner. On the nights of the 4th and the 6th of May, the squadron bombed military installations in Le Havre in France. On the 8th of May, 305 Squadron participated in a massive raid on Bremen and Hamburg, involving nearly 400 RAF bombers. During the mission over Bremen, the squadron lost a 2nd Wellington, designated SMF, shot down by a fighter over Meer in Holland. In June, Mietek flew sorties over Cologne, Bremen and Duisburg in the industrial Ruhr region. The Ruhr region was a particularly important and dangerous target, as it was the heart of the German heavy industry supporting the war effort, and it was thus very heavily defended. On Mietek's return from Bremen, one of his engines failed, but he managed to get home and land safely. The month of July was particularly intense for Mietek, with missions over Bremen, Lorient, Brest, Cologne, Osnabrück, Rotterdam and Frankfurt. Brest was also a key target, as the famous battleships Gneisenau and Scharnhorst and the cruiser Prince Eugen were docked there. Between the 30th of March and the 7th of July, the bombing of these ships was a top priority. RAF bombers carried out a total of 19 major raids on Brest. Gneisenau was hit by 4 bombs on the night of the 9th of April. Prince Eugen was seriously damaged by a bomb on the 1st of July. The Germans managed to eventually repair all the ships, and in January 1942 they made their channel dash to the relative safety of Wilhelmshaven. In July, 305 Squadron was transferred to Lindholm. On the 2nd of August, Mietek flew his 15th mission, this time on a Wellington Mark II. The target was the naval port of Cherbourg. After this mission, he was transferred as an instructor to training centres, first in Bramcote and then in Thurley. On the 1st of January 1942, he was promoted to flight lieutenant, although he had already on a number of occasions deputised as the squadron's leader. In March 1942, he was to resume operational missions again and was to fly in the famous Cologne 1000 bomber raid. But here, let's take a step back in time and retrace the path that took Mietek to England in 1940. Mieczysław, or Mietek Jonikas, was born in Vilnius on the 3rd of January 1908. At that time, Vilnius was part of the Russian Empire. Poland had disappeared from world maps following its third partition in 1795, when the country was divided between Russia, Prussia and the Austrian Empire. Mietek's father, Józef, came from Karszuny in Lithuania. He served as a battery commander in the 1st Field Artillery Regiment during the Polish-Ukrainian and Polish-Bolshevik Wars. He died in January 1937 at the age of 67 and was buried in Vilnius. After the First World War, Vilnius, which had a very large Polish community, was integrated into the newly re-established Polish state. At school, Mietek was an avid fencer and sportsman. In 1929, he joined the Academic Aero Club in Vilnius, where he underwent his first glider training. Here is an anecdote from a newspaper article describing Mietek's involvement with the club. The gliding enthusiasts in that area had been using the airports at Porubanek and Lida. This was inconvenient for the club and for the military stationed there. So Mietek and his friend Kazimierz Markiewicz went in search of an alternative airfield. A local industrialist, Włodzimierz Kurec, offered them access to some hilly land on his family estate, and the Aero Club thus acquired a new field for its gliders. On the second day of Easter, the train brought the only CW3 glider owned by the Vilnius Aero Club up to this new terrain. The glider was hauled up the hill by horses, followed by a crowd of curious spectators who shook their heads in disbelief, saying that an airplane without a motor couldn't possibly fly. To get the glider airborne, it had to be pulled by ropes, which was done with great enthusiasm by all present. They ran down the snow until they felt the glider lift off. The first flight was made by Mietek, who remained airborne for a total of 32 seconds. The onlookers were all astonished to witness this novel experience. Mietek was to fly both gliders and engine-powered aircraft at the Academic Aero Club in Vilnius. His first powered plane was an Ario 28, taking off from the Vilnius airport in Porubanek. Mietek began his compulsory military service in August 1930. After completing the basic training course in the Infantry Cadet School, he was sent to the prestigious Polish Air Force Academy in Dęblin. There he underwent observer training in the training squadron of the Air Force Officer Cadet School. Many years later, he would fondly remember two instructors, Lieutenant Colonel Alfred Peszke and Major Pilot Jan Gaździk. In August 1931, he was assigned to the 5th Air Regiment based in Lida. During his training, he had more adventures with his friend Markiewicz, including transporting decommissioned, barely airworthy Potes 15 aircraft from Lida to Dęblin. Also, at this stage in his life, we can start to appreciate the popularity he was having with young ladies. In October 1931, the Lwów Academic Aero Club organized their 5th National Gliding Expedition on their fields at Bezmiechowa, in then southern Poland. During the meeting, Mietek represented the Academic Aero Club of Vilnius and set a new Polish record for glider flight duration. Flying an open-cockpit Czajka version 1 glider, he remained airborne for 5 hours, 8 minutes and 52 seconds. The previous record had been just over 3 hours. This record was beaten by Zygmunt Laskowski, but this time on a Czajka version 2 with a closed cockpit. As a result of this achievement, Mietek gained well-deserved recognition in Polish aviation circles and received a job offer from the recently established Polish national airlines, LOT. As an active member of the Vilnius Aero Club into the 1930s, Mietek represented his club in the 5th National Tourist Aviation Competition in 1933. The competition featured a circular route, similar to that used in the successful 4th National Tourist Airplane Competition, which traversed different regions of Poland. The fourth competition had been organized in 1931, and the first place was awarded to the famous piloting duo Franciszek Żwirko and Stanisław Bigura. Soon after this event, they would perish tragically in an accident en route to Prague. In this fifth competition, Mietek was to fly an airplane built by Medvedsky and Nowakowski, called the MN5, which was purchased by the Vilnius Aero Club in 1931. This airplane had taken part in the third and fourth national tourist airplane competitions. During the fifth competition, however, the Armstrong-Siddeley engine experienced multiple failures, forcing Mietek to make 6 emergency landings. On September 8th, nearing the end stage from Łódź to Warsaw, Mietek was unable to make it to Mokotów Airport and had to make an emergency landing in Warsaw, near Słoneczna and Belvederska streets. This created a sensation and drew a large crowd of onlookers. Despite these setbacks, Mietek resumed the competition the following day, finally finishing in 18th place. Mietek was offered a position at the Polish National Airlines LOT on November 27, 1931. LOT, one of the earliest established national airlines, had been founded in December 1928. By the outbreak of the Second World War in 1939, LOT employed 26 commercial pilots, 5 pilot candidates, and over 600 technical and administrative staff. In its early years, LOT's roster consisted mainly of older pilots. In an effort to introduce new blood, a group of younger pilots was hired, and this group was to include Mietek. Naturally, this created some antipathy amongst the old guard, but thanks to this, the new young pilots became closely knit, even up to the first years of the Second World War. As it turned out later, all of them were to have colourful careers. Mietek's first plane at LOT was an Albatros B II, a World War I era plane with registration number SPABR. His subsequent training flights were on the more modern, domestically designed PZL-5. Over the next few years, Mietek would be piloting Fokker F-7s on routes including Warsaw, Gdynia and Kraków, and Junkers F-13s on routes to Warsaw, Katowice and Lwów. In 1936, he began flying both domestic and international routes, piloting LOT's newest aircraft, the Lockheed Electra and the Douglas DC-2. During this time, while attending evening French language classes in Warsaw, Mietek met his future wife, Maria Dajkowska. They were married on the 27th of October 1935. Their daughter, Elżbieta, was born in Warsaw on the 28th of September 1936. Just 3 months after his daughter's birth, on the 28th of December 1936, Mieczysław Jonikas was piloting a 10-seat Electra, registration SPAYA, on a scheduled passenger flight between Lwów and Warsaw. Due to bad weather conditions, the plane took off with an hour-and-a-half delay. Shortly after takeoff, after passing Raba Ruska, they were caught in a snowstorm, and ice started to affect the control systems. At 10:29 a.m., the second crew member, radio technician Józef Frąc, sent a message stating that the aircraft's rudders were freezing up. Jonikas was forced to make an emergency landing in fields near the village of Susiec. The plane lost stability, and at an altitude of approximately 10 meters, it tilted on its left wing, hit the ground in an inverted position, and broke up into 2 sections. The fuel ignited on impact. 2 passengers died instantly. 2 others were injured: Stefan Krzyczkowski, technical director of Polish Airlines LOT, and Stefan Ryniewicz, the Polish consul in Riga. The remaining passengers were unharmed and later continued their journey by train. Radio technician Frąc did not survive. He died the following day in a hospital in Tomaszów Lubelski as a result of his burns. Fortunately, Mieczysław Jonikas survived the crash with only a broken leg and minor burns. The commission established to investigate the accident ruled out pilot error from the start, and Mietek, after recovery, would soon resume piloting with LOT. As a footnote, in November the following year, another Electra crashed in Piaseczno near Warsaw, killing 4 people. According to his logbook, Mietek took off from Warsaw Okęcie on the afternoon of the 31st of August 1939 on a routine passenger flight to Budapest Budaerz. He was piloting a Douglas DC-2, registration SPASL. The flight lasted 2 hours and 40 minutes, and the aircraft landed in Budapest at 4:45 p.m. On the 1st of September, Mietek took off from Budapest Budaerz at 7 a.m. for what was supposed to be a return flight to Warsaw. However, being notified about the outbreak of war and the bombing of Warsaw and Kraków, the aircraft was diverted to Skniów airfield near Lwów, where he landed at 9 a.m. On the 2nd of September, Jonikas received orders to transport a 15-man airport detachment from Lwów to a field airstrip at Wieliczk. As Polish military aircraft began arriving at the airfield, there was concern that the DC-2's uncamouflaged gleaming body would attract the attention of enemy reconnaissance aircraft. On September 5th, Jonikas received orders to return, not to Lwów, but to LOT's backup airfield at Wiszenka-Ostrożec, near Pnikut. His passengers were a group of 15 LOT employees. At Wiszenka, the plane was painted in camouflage and covered with pine branches to make it less visible to enemy aircraft. With Poland's position deteriorating because of the rapid advance of German forces, a strategic decision was made to retreat towards Romania, to preserve as much of the Polish army as possible and to allow for potential regrouping. At the beginning of the war, Romania was one of the few neighbouring countries not yet directly involved in the conflict. On September 10th at dawn, Mietek Jonikas departed Wiszenka for Bucharest-Baniasza, this time with a group of 11 Polish aviation specialists, led by Lieutenant Colonel Stanisław Luziński. This group was tasked with taking delivery of British-made combat aircraft in Constanta, Romania. The next entry in his flight log concerns a flight from Bucharest to Czerniowce on September 11th, followed by a return flight to Bucharest on September 19th. During these flights over Romanian territory, the Polish crews were accompanied by armed Romanian airmen, and on the ground their aircraft were guarded by armed sentries. On September 29th, the plane was sequestered by the Romanian government. This was unusual because the plane was technically a civilian aircraft. After the Russian invasion of Poland, diplomatic pressure was applied to Romania to detain Polish forces. In reality, the Romanians encouraged the Polish forces to leave the country. In Bucharest, Mietek struck up a noteworthy acquaintance with Arthur Forbes, who was the British air attaché and intelligence officer in Bucharest. Forbes was later to become the 9th Earl of Granada. The Polish Airlines LOT approached Forbes to try and sell its grounded planes to the newly formed British Overseas Airways Corporation. This transaction was not completed due to Romanian interference. During the war, Forbes used his own private aircraft, a Percival Q-6, for missions for the British government. He flew Mietek to Belgrade and then on to Athens. From Athens, Mietek took a boat to Marseille in France. After the war, Mietek would occasionally fly for Forbes as his personal pilot. When Mietek arrived in Paris on the 30th of October 1939, he registered together with other members of the Polish forces that were already congregating there. France was somewhat overwhelmed by the massive influx of Polish soldiers and airmen in 1939. Although the French appreciated their troops being supplemented by a trained and motivated military force, they faced a number of challenges. One problem was how to integrate a foreign armed force into their own military structure. The second problem was the logistics of relocating and housing these new soldiers. Aviation personnel was relocated to Lyon, where they were housed at the massive exhibition center. The lack of heating in the buildings, combined with the harsh winter of 1939, made conditions exceptionally difficult. At the beginning of 1940, Mieczysław Jonikas, now a second lieutenant pilot, was assigned to join the French aerial forces in Morocco at the École des Observateurs in Rabat. Before the war, France had embarked on an ambitious plan to greatly expand its air force. It took an average of 15 months to train a pilot, and this was often complicated by poor weather conditions in metropolitan France. Because of this, the French Air Force established piloting schools in France's North African colonies. With the advent of Polish aviators, a group called Alger Maroc, consisting of 67 officers and subordinates, was formed under the command of Major Victor Rill. This group left for Africa on the 29th of April 1940. Members of this group were assigned to 4 training centers: Rabat, Marrakesh and Fez in Morocco, and Blida in Algeria. Apart from his overall responsibility, Rill was put directly in charge of a group of 19 airmen that were stationed in Rabat. Mietek was assigned to this group. On the 11th of March, the pilots began flights on Potes 25s to confirm their flying skills. This procedure was purely a formality for the experienced Polish pilots. The Poles were then assigned to 2 training squadrons. The Premier Groupe d'Instruction, which was a light aircraft group, was to operate on Potes 25s, and the Deuxième Groupe Lourd was assigned to heavier 4-engine planes, in this case the Leo 206, an aircraft that was only used for training. This group was based at Salé, Rabat's secondary airport. On the 14th of March, Mietek, together with Captain Tomaszewski and Sergeant Młodzianka, began flying the Leo 206s. In March, they completed 18 flights, spending over 10 hours in the air. Starting April 17th, Jonikas, Tomaszewski and Młodzianka began training on operational bombers, the Marcel Bloch MB-210. On these aircraft, the Polish pilots completed a total of 89 flights, lasting over 100 hours. On the 10th of May, the Germans began their advance on the Ardennes, which was the prelude to their invasion of France. Meanwhile, on the 17th of June, Mietek, together with his old colleagues from Lot, Aleksandrovich and Surin, were given an unusual assignment, doubtless on the basis of their extensive flying experience. They took off from Rabat and flew to Algiers, landing at Hussein Dey Airfield. The next day, from nearby Blida, the airmen collected and transported 3 small Morane-Saulnier MS-315 aircraft to the Meknès airfield in Morocco, covering over 800 kilometers across desert terrain. The details of their flight are shown on this map. On the 22nd of June 1940, France and Germany signed an armistice at Compiègne. Major Rill began talks with the British Consulate General in Rabat and obtained an agreement for the evacuation of Polish personnel to Britain via Casablanca and Gibraltar. Thanks to Rill, 30 French officers were able to rejoin de Gaulle in London by putting on Polish uniforms. A few weeks later, Mieczysław Jonikas was assigned to 305 Bomber Squadron